Well, the differences between writing a linear script and writing an interactive script are tremendous. With a linear script, you can write it from point A to point B, tell whatever you like along the way. With an interactive script, it's much tougher. You've got to take into consideration all the branches, all the different possibilities of what the player may do, and the inventory items the player may have, for example. So you can't write it up as a linear story. You've got to write it up as a branching story. You've got to have several different documents, one containing a list of objects and other interactions, and so forth.
My job on the Journeyman project was as conceptual designer, and I was responsible for visualizing all of the environments and props and essentially the worlds that you travel through in the game. A lot of what I do in conceptually working out these environments is really problem solving. It's a matter of thinking in terms of what would this device really be used for, how would it be used, and therefore what would it look like. A lot of the environments emerged out of the fact that we needed 3 distinct looking time zones with different levels of technology in each, progressively looking more advanced. When we first started off, I was working on pretty highly detailed color sketches in marker, but by the end of it we were reduced to having to do really quick pencil thumbnail sketches and have Jose rip them off of my desk and start modeling them up before I was even finished. An example of that was the machine room in the Mars time zone, where really it's almost an indecipherable scribble, but with a lot of arm waving and a lot of looking over Jose's shoulder, we managed to whip it into pretty much exactly what I had imagined in very little time.
It was my responsibility to talk with the conceptual designer to get a full understanding of his sketches before I took it to the 3D environment. Part of my job was to use the modeling tools of Swivel Pro, and I would take the drawings from the conceptual designer, and after I figured out how everything worked, I was able to break the model down and make the models by pieces. Once the models were done, I would hand it off to the people rendering the environments and animations.
Some of the creative 3D animations that I had to create for the Journeyman project were, well, one of the major ones was the robot walking across the screen. That was quite a feat. The way I approached it was not to use what we were using for rendering. I actually went to a different package. Jose would give me the model in 3D with all of its swivel points set for all the joints, for example, elbow, where it's supposed to bend, and so on and so forth. And then I would take that and, using Infinity, animate each little part one piece at a time to try to make it look like a walking robot. The environments themselves have been set up in what we call electric image. It's a 3D animation systems program that we use to set the lighting, the moods, some of the animation is done in it, and what is involved in it is a matter of setting up like a camera in the real world, moving it around in motion, taking snapshots of what you want to see, and lighting it just like as if it was a real set.
Once we had the 3-dimensional models all set and done, the next step was to texture them. Whether that was done by creating the textures from scratch, bringing in photographic images that we had created, or by scanning in little plastic toys on our flatbed scanner, all this was being done in Photoshop. Once we had our final rendered images, we had another challenge that we faced, and that is that with the current version of electric image that we were using, we weren't getting the shadows and reflections necessary for true photorealism. We didn't have enough so that a person sitting in a darkened room with headphones on playing Journeyman could really suspend disbelief in terms of whether they were actually on Mars or underwater or even in a futuristic apartment building. So at that point what we had to do was retouch each of the 1,600 frames involved with Journeyman and get them to the point of true photorealism.
Defense Command Post on security alert. Access denied.
My responsibilities were to take scenes that came to my computer and to add foliage, to add music, to add depth as far as audibly to what you would see visually. For example, the subroom scene in NORAD, Jack Davis did some moving water and a lot of shadowy, there was a lot of dark feel in it, and what I did was I filled a bathtub with water and I lowered a microphone in it and splashed the water around it. Did 2 or 3 different tracks of that to try to add a real movingness to the water. And then one of the scenes that you came from was an alarm in another room. I took that alarm sound, added a lot of reverb and a lot of echo to that, brought back down that sound volume and added that to the splashing water to create a new environment and a new sound. In the Mars maze, I knew that a person had 3 minutes in this maze, and by the end of their journey, they were going to be running out of oxygen, and I wanted to kind of create a sense of danger. So as the player plays this scene out, the music begins to slow down. A heartbeat starts to pulsate and get louder and louder and louder, and then heavy breathing toward the end of the track. So the track itself actually had an interactive feel to it along with the scene.
My job as programmer is to take all of the elements that people create, whether they be graphics, text, and audio, put them all together so you create a virtual reality type of experience. You immerse the user into that world. For instance, in the NORAD subroom, there is the ambient audio of an alarm going off. There is water sloshing in a pool near the submarines, and you hear all of that, you see it visually, and you experience it so that you feel that you're really immersed in that environment. All of the programming in the Journeyman project was done using Macromind Director. However, on the PC platform, we chose to use C code so that we would speed up the code that was running on that platform. We were developing graphics and code at the same time, so later time zones had more interactivity and more variables of what might happen, so I had to account for those later. So the code was actually changing through the whole process of developing the game until it was one final stable piece of code.